Hey, y'all, welcome to the Redzone Rodeo. Thank you for joining. My name's Carson.
I'm your resident brokenhearted Cowboys fan, Rob.
And we're going to be bringing to you some awesome football stuff today. So thank you for tuning in with us as we cover a bunch of topics. But we're first going to start off with probably what's on all y'all's mind. And that's going to definitely be the NFL playoffs and what happened in these divisional round games that we saw this past weekend. Some great matchups, some blowouts a little bit, I would say. All around some pretty good games. But, we're going to dive right in. So, Rob, what is your first reactions to the games that happened this past weekend? What stood out to you?
Well, I'm looking at that Chiefs Bills game. Oh my God, man, that was tough to watch for the Bills. I feel so bad for them. As a Cowboys fan, like I empathize with their pain where they do great in the regular season and they just immediately choke in the postseason. And also, being owned by another team. They're owned by the Chiefs the same way the Cowboys are owned by the Packers, sadly. Um, I also have to admit I was very impressed with Kansas City coming out there getting the win against Buffalo, who I feel like had a much better roster than Kansas City. I'm really excited to see them play the Baltimore Ravens. Those are the two best teams in the AFC for my money. I think that's going to be an exciting matchup. How about you, Carson?
Yeah, no, that was a great game. I mean, talk about coming down to the wire with that field goal. I feel so bad sometimes for these kickers when it's just like the pressure is all on you and you're paid to do one thing and you just don't do it. You don't do it. So I also was with the heartbroken Buffalo Bills fans watching that ball not go through the uprights and punching Mahomes. I forget what number playoff win this is for him. Is it 15? Is it 15 now or no,
15
it's
or 17.
13.
So I don't know how many wins it is exactly, but it's his sixth straight AFC championship game
Yeah.
since becoming the starter for Kansas City. And that alone is just, I don't know how that's even possible. Man, I would kill for that as a Cowboys fan. I just want one. He has six in a row. It's crazy.
And also with that game too, Mahomes and Travis Kelce became the most in terms of dynamic duo between quarterback and tight end, most to score in playoff games. This past game against Buffalo, they outdid Tom Brady and Gronkowski. By one, but still, I mean they beat the record. So that's crazy in itself.
That's
I'm
insane.
also, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I thought that was crazy when I read that. But also super happy. The Texans are out. They are done. They are not going to win a Super Bowl before the Titans do. So that is a plus side. Um, at my workplace, I there was a Ravens fan that came in and I kind of greeted him and I was like, you better make sure that you take care of the Texans this upcoming weekend. And he was like, man, I really hope that we can. And I was like, I just shared with him, I was like, I'm a Titans fan. And if the Texans end up winning a Super Bowl before the Titans can, I'm going to be heartbroken, and if you think Rob is bad and depressed with how bad the Cowboys lost, I mean, it would be years probably to recover for me if that ever happened. But fear not, the Titans are going to win the Super Bowl this next year. So that's really matters really moving forward. But anyways, I digress. Um, some great games. Ravens taking down the Texans and the Chiefs taking down the Bills to advance to the AFC Championship game of the Ravens versus the Chiefs. How we feel in these teams going up against each other, Rob?
Oh man, it's going to be a great game. I mean, it's the best quarterback really outside of Tom Brady that has ever played the game versus the Baltimore Ravens, who have probably the most complete roster in the league. Just dominant on defense, dominant on the offensive line, explosive receivers, great quarterback in Lamar Jackson. But I think I'm going to go with the Chiefs in this one. I'm done doubting Patrick Mahomes in the postseason. I said he was going to lose the past 2 weeks, or at least this past week, and he won. And I just I don't think he's going to lose in the postseason the next two games. I just really don't. And it's not because the Chiefs are better than the Ravens. I don't think they are. I just think Mahomes has this gene that just clicks into place whenever they're in the playoffs, and he just makes the plays that need to happen in order for them to win. And I think it's going to be really close. I think it's going to be another thriller, just like the Buffalo Chiefs game. But I think the Chiefs are ultimately going to pull out the win.
Yeah, and you all know this as well, but I have bet against the Chiefs the entire way through these playoffs. I thought the Dolphins were going to beat them in the wild card round. I thought the Bills were going to beat them in the divisional round. And I'm with Rob. I'm done betting against Patrick Mahomes, and I know that they're going up against the league's MVP and Lamar Jackson. But I'm done betting against Patrick Mahomes. I feel like the Chiefs can walk into Baltimore and take them down. I am still a little worried as well with, just Lamar's playoff record. He's never played in a conference championship game. So that, is a new thing for him. So, how is he going to play? Obviously, he did very well against the Texans, especially in that second half. But, you know, it, it's I think it's definitely going to be just a heavyweight battle. It really is between these two guys. And we have Mark Andrews most likely coming back for the Ravens, and Lamar said, basically paraphrasing here, but he's like that's my right hand guy pretty much. And so if he's coming back into the lineup, he of course has been out a number of weeks. But when he was in, Lamar and him were just connecting crazy. And, we could definitely see Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelsey, Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews type game going on where it's huge games for these tight ends. But even wide receiver room, with on the Ravens side with Odell Beckham Jr., we saw him last year or 2 years ago, I should say, not last year, 2 years ago with the Rams, doing some outstanding stuff, even in the Super Bowl. So, still a top caliber player, but I'm actually looking forward to seeing how Zay Flowers does again. Just an absolute standout rookie receiver. And on the other side with the Chiefs, with Rice being the rookie receiver, stepping up to be that number one guy for Patrick Mahomes in these playoff games where everything's been on the line. So really the battle between two rookie wide receivers is going to be really great to see as well, as they battle it out. And both squads have great defenses, Super Bowl caliber defenses. So it's going to be, a really good game back and forth. So yeah, it's a lot of stacked talent on both sides. Great matchup for the AFC.
Yeah, well, now let's switch over to the NFC. Carson, you did, in fact, lose another bet to me, betting that the Buccaneers would beat the Lions. I gave you 6.5 points, so I was
I
very generous.
know
I feel like.
you
Uh,
were.
it was closer than I thought it would be. I thought the Lions were gonna take a big lead early and run away with it, but the Buccaneers, they played a better game than I anticipated. Especially their defense, I was very impressed with throughout most of the game. They managed to keep it really close. They managed to keep the Lions from running up the score. Containing an offense that explosive and that efficient throughout the season is very impressive. And I thought Baker Mayfield, outside of obviously the fourth quarter where things really fell apart and he threw that game-ending interception, played a very good game under really bright lights, and I think he might have a future as the Buccaneers quarterback one. And I could definitely see the Buccaneers being a legitimate playoff team next year and for many years to come, especially if they manage to get some good draft picks and replenish some of that aging talent they have on their roster. On the other side, the what was the other NFC game again? It was the Packers and the Niners.
Yes.
That was a great game in that, I thought both of the teams looked really bad and I severely disliked both of them. No, but Jordan Love was amazing also in that game right up until the end when he threw that ridiculous interception for no reason. Going up against the 49ers defense and being able to keep his composure, make big time throws, keep that offense going, and even have his team with a lead late in the fourth quarter. That was super impressive. Brock Purdy leading that comeback drive. Uh, wow, that's probably the most impressive thing I've ever seen Brock Purdy do. And Christian McCaffrey, man, he is just on another level. That touchdown run at the end of the game, oh my God. There's no one else like him in the league right now. I mean, the way he cuts and moves and like gets off of tackles, it's insane. It pains me very much to say that, but oh my goodness. McCaffrey is insane. I think the Lions Niners game is also going to be super close because I think the Niners, for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe they're just rusty. Maybe it's going to be because Debo Samuel's out. They just don't feel as complete and as dominant right now as they did during the regular season. And I think the Lions are hitting their stride and really clicking on all cylinders for the first time all season long right now in the playoffs, which is exactly what you want. So I think between those two teams, the Niners and the Lions, I'm going to go with Detroit.
Yeah, absolutely on all levels, these two teams clearly, even looking at the 49ers Packers game, it was a little rusty for them. A lot of time, for a lot of these players and a lot of these starters, they rested week 18 and rested a bye week. And so they're taking realistically 2 full weeks of rest before playing. I just think that's just kind of part of the process. You kind of see that sometimes with like week one play where you just see crazy stuff happening because teams are still like trying to gel. And so that length of time period, even though it's good for the player's health in terms of, injury related wise and healing up for the next kind of matchup, it can throw them out of sync. And so I think, there was some question marks surrounding, oh my goodness, what are the 49ers doing? Why is Brock Purdy not seeing these routes like he normally would see? Not to say that, not to discredit them completely, but I do think this team is starting to just get moving again. And of course, when beating the Packers, they're moving on into the championship game playing the Lions. But I'm really liking what the Lions are doing. I was wrong, of course, about the Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield, I think, played super well. Other than, of course, that fourth quarter kind of interception that led, obviously, to the end of the game. But the Lions played really well. I know, the questions are still with their cornerbacks on defense. Mike Evans was able to kind of get in and around and get open. So, this Lions defense in terms of that part needs to really start to figure out what they need to do to shut down some of these top receivers, especially with Brandon Ayuk. And I know the big question mark for this game is Deebo Samuel going to be playing? And I think that's really the biggest one because he did not practice today, but there is hope in terms that he's feeling better. So, that's really, I think, going to change the dynamic of the game a little bit for the 49ers offense is Deebo Samuel going to be healthy? Because if he's not out there, then they have to rely on some of these other powerhouse weapons, but that's, more people that you can kind of pay attention to. Where Deebo Samuel is just that weapon that how it's hard to cover him. It's hard to cover him in any role on that offense. So that'll be an interesting storyline to follow as we get closer to this Sunday game. But Dan Campbell's crew, I wouldn't put anything against them. They can win as much as they want, and they love playing for him. And I know it's going to be different not playing in Detroit with that home crowd backing them up. But I think this is also going to be a really great game, just like the AFC Championship. And I'm also going to be taking the Lions. I do think that the Lions can upset them. And I think it would be really cool to see them in their first Super Bowl. I think it's the first Super Bowl appearance ever. I'm pretty sure. I don't think they've ever
Yeah.
appeared in one. So
Yep.
crazy. So really, really great stuff.
So are we both then predicting a Chiefs Lions Super Bowl?
So I don't know. I don't know. As much as I would love to see Eminem facing off against Taylor Swift, in the battle of the Super Bowl, I don't know. As much as I've bet against Mahomes, and I keep eating my words every single time. And maybe this for the Chiefs fans out here, maybe it's good for me to pick the Ravens here because it means that the Chiefs are going to win because every single team that I picked against them to win haven't won. So, but I'm going with the Ravens. I think that they're going to beat the Chiefs. I think Lamar is going to snap that, outside kind of judgment of, well, you never really done super well in the playoffs type kind of thing. He did that when they played against the Texans. I think he's going to have another stellar game, especially with the weapons around him with Mark Andrews coming back as well. I think that connection is going to be elite. So with that, I do think the Ravens will beat the Chiefs. So I'm saying Ravens Lions Super Bowl. That's going to be my prediction.
Wow. Okay. Would you care to go triple or nothing on our bet with the
Let's
Ravens
do
and
it. Let's do it.
okay.
You know, it seems every single time I bet against the Chiefs winning, I lose. So, this will be good. Let's just erase it all at the start.
Will you give me -3 because that's the line, or do you want just straight up? I'm down with either.
Let's just do straight up. So the bet is so basically if the Ravens and Lions make it, then I win the bet. Or
Understand
are we
the
betting on
outcome,
the
just the AFC
the outcome of the
Championship.
Ravens Chiefs?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Oh, dude, I don't. Let's just do outcome. Let's do outcome. Let's just do
Okay.
that. I'm confident. I'm confident in the Ravens. That's what I'm gonna
Okay.
do. Just like I was
All right.
confident in the Bucks and confident in the Dolphins.
All
Hey,
right. You're up.
I'm just full of confidence. I'm just full of confidence. What can I
You
say?
absolutely are. You have not wavered one bit throughout this entire playoffs. So I will give you that. You are full of confidence.
And I just keep losing. So that confidence is really getting me far.
You know what? And we'll end up going quadruple or nothing for the Super Bowl, probably would be my guess. So
It just keeps adding up until I'm just in debt for life, pretty much.
we'll just keep going into next season. Quintuple or
Yeah,
nothing.
exactly. We'll
It'll
just
just
keep going to the
alternate.
UFL and it'll just keep going back and forth. If I even win a bet here, probably not, though. It's probably safe to say whatever I think is going to happen, the opposite is really the reality of the situation. So, if there's anyone that's wanting to make a good bet, probably bet against what I'm saying because obviously, so far up to this point, it hasn't been working out.
If I bet $20 on your first prediction against your first prediction, and then I took what I won from that and bet it against your second prediction, I would be so rich by now. I should just start
I
betting every
know.
opposite of what you say is going to happen.
You would be, and then you would be able to clear some of those debts with some of our other buddies, since you unfortunately did bet that your Cowboys would make the Super Bowl.
I did
Um,
clear one of them this past weekend, so I
oh,
only left.
oh,
Mhm.
well, there you go. An honorable man clears his debts.
I, unless I have a legally binding verbal contract, stating otherwise. That's neither here nor there.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But yeah, Ravens Lions Super Bowl. You're saying Chiefs Lions Super Bowl. Um, Either game I think would be super cool to see. But I guess we're both going against the 49ers. Interesting.
Yeah, I've kind of lost faith in them over the past few weeks. And that
Yeah.
might just be my Cowboys bias showing because they've eliminated us the past 2 years, but I don't believe in them.
I was just gonna ask you that. I was gonna be like, is that your Cowboys bias kind of sneaking in a little bit there and being like writing them off? Yeah, just a tad.
A
Yeah,
little
that's
bit.
that. Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. Well,
See,
speaking of the Cowboys, Mike McCarthy is staying as your head coach, Rob. That news
I
broke a little bit ago, but we haven't really fully talked about it. So tell us, what do you think? Do you see this franchise going to the Super Bowl next year?
Man, I am conflicted. Okay, because you look at the regular season, he's had 3 straight 12-win seasons. No Cowboys head coach has ever done that. He's the first one. Not Tom Landry never did it. Jimmy Johnson never did it. Mike McCarthy was the only one who's ever done that. His offensive play calling was on point the second half of this year. After week 7, after the loss of the 49ers, the Cowboys had the number one scoring offense, the number one passing offense. He really just let Dak cut it loose and throw the ball deep to CeeDee Lamb 100 times a game, and that really worked. Outside of probably some of our biggest games of the season, the one against Buffalo, obviously, the one against Miami, which if we had won those 2 games, we would have had home field advantage in the first seed locked up. And then obviously in the playoffs, it did not work for the first half of the game at all. We had 0 points in most of the first half. Um, in the second half, it worked fine, but in the first half, it was really bad. And I don't know what happened in the playoffs. I don't know if that was a coaching failure. I don't know if that was a player failure, but to some degree, responsibility for that lays on the head coach. Because if your players weren't ready, that's your fault. Even if I think you could give most of the blame to the players for not executing properly, it was your job to have them ready to go out there and play. And if the entire team was not ready to play, if they were like having mental breakdowns or like they were too nervous to show up, that's your fault as the head coach. You've been there before. You've taken a team to a Super Bowl victory before. You knew exactly what was going to happen. You knew what you had to do to get them prepared, and you didn't do it. Come on, man. Now, all that being said, I'm not totally devastated that he's staying because he has been a great regular season coach. And maybe he can figure something out in the postseason next year. Although, obviously, you guys have been able to do that yet. So I'm not really expecting him to. Um, but I also think if we get better personnel and maybe change up the defense a little bit, which is definitely still a possibility for the Cowboys right now, things would be a lot better. If we hadn't given up 48 points in that game, we probably would have won. I mean, the offense was really clicking in the second half, and their offense wasn't doing as much as it was in the first half. Um, so I think you could certainly win a Super Bowl with this team with Mike McCarthy at head coach. But I think you also have to expect when you get to the playoffs, you're going to have sloppiness that other teams don't. So you're going to have a really, really, really good team to be able to bounce back from that and make it to a Super Bowl. And that's just, I wish we had fired him and gone in a different direction. But now that we haven't, I'm going to try my best to put as much faith as I possibly can back in Big Mike.
Yeah. Well, definitely, we kind of talked about this when the Cowboys ended up when they did lose to the Packers. But there just seemed to be just this disconnect on the field. I know there was those beginning kind of like shots by the camera between Dak and CeeDee Lamb, whether they were arguing or just like they didn't seem like they were on the same page like they had been all season. And I know,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily on the coaching staff for that happening, but again, it's the preparedness. It's the preparedness that they need to go out there, and their job is still not only just coaching, calling the plays, doing what they need to on the sideline, but also preparing their team for that next matchup. And so, I think it's definitely gonna be interesting having Mike McCarthy coming back as the Cowboys. I think they're still going to be a top team in the league. I have complete faith that they're going to continue to do good things in the season. It's the question marks really come for me when it comes to the playoffs, as you mentioned. So very interesting. And something else I wanted to ask you about too. Have you been reading about or hearing some of the I guess social media battles going on about people, especially family members, attacking and telling what Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons should do in this scenario? What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
So Dak Prescott's brother, Micah Parsons' brother, and CeeDee Lamb's mom all came out and said they didn't want their respective family member to play for the Cowboys anymore because they caught a lot of criticism from the fans after they lost in that playoff game. I don't really think they should be doing that. Like that really puts their family member in an awkward situation, both with the team and with the fans. And Micah Parsons came out and he's like, "My brother doesn't speak for me. I love Dallas. I want to play and win a championship for Dallas." Lamb and Prescott haven't really come out and said anything yet, but it just I don't think their family members should have said that. I can understand they were upset seeing Cowboys fans like be really mean and disrespectful to their family members. I can understand why that would make you want to say something like that. But I mean, that's a problem you're going to encounter anywhere, any team. It's just more pronounced in Dallas because there's more Cowboys fans than any other team. So you're going to see it all over social media whenever you go on there. Whereas, if they were playing for some like less noticeable team or less watched team, then, it probably wouldn't be as noticeable. Um, I think criticizing, especially Micah Parsons or CeeDee Lamb, they both played really well in that playoff game against the Packers. I know the box score doesn't look great, especially for Micah because he didn't have any sacks or anything. But if you go back and actually watch the game, he was destroying the offensive line whenever he was matched up, one on one especially. But he even beat some double teams. He was still Micah Parsons. He played the run really well. It's just Jordan Love got the ball out so fast. He had wide open receivers all the time. It didn't matter how well Micah Parsons was playing when the secondary was playing as badly as they were. CeeDee Lamb, again, was amazing. He caught pretty much everything that came his way, had over 100 receiving yards, even in a losing effort. Dak Prescott, now he definitely deserves some criticism. That pick six he threw probably is what lost us the game. Because if you figure we go score a touchdown on that drive and then you subtract the touchdown from the Packers score, have like a 14-point swing, that would have put us at 46 and it would basically been a tie game in the last 2 minutes there instead of the Packers having a two-score lead. Um, So that Dak Prescott definitely deserves some criticism for the way he played, but that doesn't erase the fact that he had an MVP caliber season all year long. Although he did seem to shrink in like the biggest moments against the best teams, like Dolphins, the Bills, and obviously the Packers in the playoffs. So that does raise some questions about Dak. Um, but talking about their family members specifically, I don't think their family members should be talking like that. I don't think it reflects how the players feel, and I think it just kind of creates a bad situation for everyone.
Yeah. I just thought it was very interesting, especially now in this new heightened age of social media, how family members are taking kind of to the masses and trying to speak for family members, even though, that might not be the best best in their interests at all. So
Definitely
very
not.
interesting. Did you see the comment? I believe CJ Stroud made it, but he said basically like talking to CD Lamb to come to Houston to play. Um, yeah, I saw that, and I really hope that doesn't happen because if that's the case, then that's just another person we have to play twice a year, and that's going to be no fun because obviously CD Lamb is legit.
Yeah, no, CeeDee Lamb isn't going anywhere. I'm sure the Cowboys are going to make him the richest wide receiver in NFL history sometime, probably this offseason, because he's eligible to negotiate an extension. Same thing with Micah Parsons. I don't think he's going to go anywhere either. Dak Prescott, on the other hand, that's where it gets a little interesting. The more I looked at the situation, I thought the Cowboys didn't really have any flexibility and they had no choice but to extend him. But there's a reality where they could just eat the cap hit from Prescott this offseason by clearing room through restructuring other contracts and then let him walk as a free agent next year and maybe roll forward with someone like Trey Lance or maybe another quarterback they draft or trade for. Um, I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to continue to roll with Dak Prescott, but his consistent failure in the playoffs definitely has to at least have you consider moving in a different direction at quarterback. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Um, well, that was not the only coaching news that came out this past week. Your beloved Titans have hired the Bengals offensive coordinator. What's his name? Bill Callahan, right?
Brian Callahan.
Brian Callahan as their new head coach.
Yes.
So I'm sure you're very excited about that.
I am. I'm very excited about the hiring of Brian Callahan. There's just been a lot of just uncertainty, especially with owner, front office, coaching staff for the Titans this past season. And a lot of it actually has come to light as of recent, especially with the hiring of Brian Callahan. And first off, I think it's a great selection. He's an offensive minded coach. He is I mean, his resume is just absolutely long with people that he's coached up offensively to be great stars. And one of those names that a lot of you probably already know is the Bengals quarterback, Joe Burrow. He pretty much had single handedly shaped that quarterback from his, I wouldn't say disastrous rookie season, but it wasn't the greatest, into his second season coming out and leading the Bengals all the way to a Super Bowl. And so, not only does that kind of give me excitement about the movement that the Titans are going to be going in this next season with Brian Callahan, but the focus that this organization is really putting on is the development of Will Levis. Otherwise, you wouldn't really be hiring someone like Brian Callahan to come in. One concern I do have is, he's never actually called plays before. So he's never been a play caller. So that'll be interesting to see moving forward. But still this kind of development has really kind of put the organization all behind Will Levis and pretty much saying this is our guy, we're going to build around him, and that's where we're going to go. And especially this past season with the Titans, it's been ups and downs. Whether are we starting a rebuild? Are we not rebuilding? Are we trying to go for the Super Bowl? There was so many different questions. And with Vrabel gone now and Brian Callahan being the guy, a lot of those questions have cleared up. Something interesting too, moving forward, especially with this hire, is you know the Bengals when Joe Burrow was going into his second year. One thing that they wanted to do was to fix the offensive line. So everyone thought that the Bengals were going to go out and draft a high, offensive lineman with their pick in the first round. What they instead decided to do is they instead decided to go out and get Jamar Chase. And we all know how that helped the Bengals moving forward, especially being able to sign people in free agency to the offensive line to help fix some of those issues. So are we going to see kind of a repeated process when with Callahan coming over to the Titans? Because, for the longest time, the Titans have been saying, okay, we're most likely going with an offensive tackle at pick number 7 in this draft. Can we see maybe a Malik Neighbors being drafted at 7 or one of these other wide receivers kind of in that kind of same format that when he was with the Bengals when Jamar Chase was drafted? So very interesting things to keep your eye on as we're moving forward. But overall, I think it's a great hire. And for the most part, it's the Titans restructuring everything. And one of the main reasons they had to let Vrabel go is who had the power in the organization. When they brought Rand Carthon in, um, it was one of those things that Vrabel didn't want the guy. So how do you think that relationship is going to go when you bring in someone that the coach doesn't want, and when he's asking, can we have a mediator? Can we have someone coming in to control who actually has the say? That's not great for an organization. And so Amy Adams Strunk has gone out and she's pretty much clearly defined everybody's role. And they've elevated actually Chad Brinker up from being the kind of person in charge of, salary cap, some of those different key things. Now he's kind of taking care of a lot of the different, front office type things. Rand Carthon has complete control over the team, including the head coach, picks, everything like that. And so it's a much more modern look to a team. And that's something that Amy Adams Strunk wanted to do. She wanted to go through and she wanted to really kind of modernize this franchise and get it to be a winning franchise like some of these other franchises we see in the championship rounds this upcoming weekend. So all in all, I think great moves for the Titans. We'll obviously keep our eyes on it, see how well it goes. But I am stoked.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a great hire for the Titans. When you have a young quarterback like that, that's exactly what you want. You want an offensive coach who can come in and build around them, especially a guy who's proven that he can do that around a young quarterback with, like you said, what he did with Joe Burrow 2 years back. I think also you made a great point about building the offensive line and getting some wide receiver help. This draft is historically deep at both wide receiver and offensive tackle. There's about 8 to 10 offensive tackles who are going to have first round grades in this draft, and at least some of them are going to be available in the second round. As it's pretty similar for wide receiver, there's probably like 5 or 6, maybe even 7 wide receivers who are going to have a first round grade this year. I don't know how many of them will make it to the second round, but it'll at least be a handful. So this is probably the perfect year for the Titans to kind of begin rebuilding their offensive line and their wide receiver core, because there's a lot of talent out there to begin doing that. I think if they go out and sign some good offensive line free agents and maybe draft an offensive tackle in the second round and then take, like you said, an impact wide receiver with that first pick, whether that's Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze, whichever one of those two guys is still there at that point, I think you could absolutely see the Titans turn things completely around next year and be a serious contender in the playoffs. Now, obviously, that's contingent on a lot of things happening, them adding a lot of pieces, but they have everything in front of them right now. And if they go and play this offseason right, I could absolutely see them doing some serious damage next year.
Absolutely. And something too to keep in mind is, that maybe that the acquisition of T. Higgins becomes more realistic with Brian Callahan coming over. So that's also something to keep my eyes on, and something I would really be stoked if we have Hopkins coming back. We have, T. Higgins in that lineup. We still got Traylon Burks, and then let's say we add Malik Neighbors or Odunze. I mean, just those guys at wide receivers just would be crazy. So yeah, I think the future's bright, of course, if they play their cards right. But I have faith in Rand Carthon, and like some Titans fans are saying, let Rand cook. That's the new motto. So
Great
that's what I'm gonna
motto.
do. And speaking of the drafts, let's kind of get into it with what do we think the Bears are going to do with this first overall pick? Are they going to jump right in and grab someone at number 1? Is it going to be a quarterback? Do they trade down? Or and question marks surrounding Justin Fields. What do we think?
Well, this is really tough because at first, to me, it seems obvious. Like you take, arguably the greatest quarterback prospect that we've seen in a long time in Caleb Williams, and then you trade Justin Fields and you build around Caleb. But the more I think about it, it's a tough question. Caleb Williams is really good, and I don't think Justin Fields is the guy. But there are about five quarterbacks who are going to be really good starters in this league in this year's draft. If you trade back from the first spot and then also trade Justin Fields, you would have an insane amount of draft capital to build around whoever your quarterback is with the team, whatever quarterback you have. I think you could probably get a guy like Michael Penix Jr. or Bo Nix or JJ McCarthy, guys who I think could be viable starters in this league, late in the first round or even in the second round. So if you're the Bears and you trade back like 3 or 4 spots and then you have that ninth pick and then you trade Justin Fields for a second round pick or whatever, I think you'd be in a great spot to go draft a guy like Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr. and pair him with DJ Moore. Maybe draft another offensive lineman to pair with. Well, they have two really good young tackles, so I don't know if they draft a tackle, but they could definitely draft another corner. I know they've been struggling at that spot. They have a lot of spots they could address in the first round. There's a lot of talent this year in the first round. They could build a really good team around a guy like Bo Nix or JJ McCarthy instead of drafting Caleb and having less resources to build around him with. But then I think it also comes down to how much better is Caleb Williams and all these other guys in the draft. If you feel like he is like a million times better, then I think if you're the Bears, what you do is you take Caleb and then you just build around him with what you have left. Um, Ultimately, I think they will just end up taking Caleb Williams. But if I were the Bears, I would trade back from the first spot and I would go pick up like a Jaden Daniels or someone like that and use the rest of that capital to build a super team around him.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you on that. I think keeping that number one overall pick only just hinders the Bears. And I think they could get so much more potential, whether that's draft capital, players, even acquisitions. I mean, that's how they got DJ Moore last draft, with that trade. So, you can do a lot of that things by just flipping it. And you don't have to even jump down very far. Let's say Washington or New England wants that number one overall pick. Well, then there you go. You're just bouncing down to 2 or 3, and maybe that's later down the line as well. But still, I mean, you're absolutely right, Rob. There's some of those quarterbacks up there that you really could take your chance on. There's no guarantee Caleb Williams is going to be the guy of the century. How many times do we see some of these guys like Patrick Mahomes was not first overall. So, he was picked up after a lot of those guys. And I think that similar situation is definitely on the minds of some of these Bears fans when they pick Trubisky over Mahomes in that draft. And that realization that, okay, we picked the wrong guy. And I think that's going to plague some Bears fans, especially kind of going into this draft with what they're going to be doing. Do you miss out on Caleb Williams, and then Caleb Williams goes off, and you're like, wow, we could have had that guy, but we did it again. We shot ourselves in the foot, and we drafted this other dude who's not working out, and now he's on the Steelers and can't play. But it's something like that like I think for Bears fans, it's tough because you know, seeing those kind of picks floundering in some of these other drafts where like, okay, I could have had this guy and this guy's playing great. And of course, hindsight's 2020. But I think that also is at play as well. But I absolutely agree. I think they should trade down from number one. They don't even have to go very far. I'm sure there's one of those teams that, can jump up to try to grab Caleb Williams, and even getting someone like Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, some of these guys that, are still top talent as well, and just, rolling the dice with them. What to do with Justin Fields, though? I think that's even a better question because, he hasn't been awful. He hasn't been completely bad. There has been some positives, whether it's his running in terms of that, but then you talk about longevity. How long can he do that in this league? Um, and where would he go? Where do you think are some potential like landing spots for Justin Fields if they were to trade him?
I think the Bears absolutely have to move on from Justin Fields. He is capable of making some great plays, but he is just not consistently a good quarterback. He is not the
Yeah.
guy who's going to be able to march you down the field every drive and score a touchdown. Every once in a while, he'll have a play that makes you go, wow, that guy is insane. But his ability to read the field isn't great. His decision making is poor. It's just, unless that stuff dramatically improves, I don't see him being good in the Bears system. But like you said, he has the ability to run the ball pretty well. And, every once in a while, he can make a great throw. So if you were to send him to a team with a young offensive minded head coach, good surrounding cast that asks him to run a lot, use his legs, and then, like, try and get more open wide receivers by running the ball a lot and creating loaded boxes, I think that would be an ideal situation for him. I think if I were the Atlanta Falcons, I would trade a second round pick for Justin Fields because I think if you put him in the right system, you can turn him into a legitimate weapon. But if I did that as the Atlanta Falcons, I would not go get Bill Belichick and make him my next head coach. I would go find a young offensive guy like the Titans just did, who can help Justin Fields grow. And he'll be a system quarterback for a few years, but maybe you could help him grow past that. Maybe you can help him see the field better, make better decisions, and turn him into what the Bears thought he could be when they picked him. But absolutely, I think his time in Chicago should be done. It's just a matter of what's more valuable, Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels and a bunch of draft picks that you can use to build around Jaden Daniels. Um, I know you brought up a really good point. How haunted would the Bears be if they traded it back from Caleb Williams and they turned into the next Patrick Mahomes? And then, I can hear the jokes now. The Bears had two chances to draft Patrick Mahomes and they missed on both
Yep.
of them. So I could definitely see why the Bears would keep that first overall pick and take Caleb Williams. But I also think I really like Jaden Daniels. I think he outplayed Caleb Williams this year. And if I was the Bears general manager, I would be totally fine trading back, getting a massive haul, and drafting a guy like Jaden Daniels and then building around him. But like I said, I can understand if they decide to stay put and take Caleb instead.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because of course, a lot of these draft projections have Caleb Williams going first overall, but who's to say Jaden, Daniels isn't going to go number one overall? Like, let's say the Bears trade that pick away to, let's just say, for example, the Commanders, and the Commanders hop up one spot and they take him, and they don't take, and then you're just like, well, what do we do here? Then I'm guessing you probably would have to take Caleb Williams. Or who else you would think would be that number two guy after Daniels goes off the board. But yeah, very very interesting way to think about what are the Bears going to do with this first pick. I think that's going to be very interesting, and the future of Justin Fields. Does this franchise believe in him? Because maybe do they take Marvin Harrison Jr. And when they trade down, maybe they don't take a quarterback at all and they stick it out with Fields. Like, that's also a possibility that they could do that with it.
Absolutely. If they traded down and then picked up Marvin Harrison Jr., they would probably build the best supporting cast in the league around Justin Fields. If they really have that much faith in Justin Fields and they gave him the best supporting cast in the league, there would really be no excuse for him not to go out there and dominate the next year. If he had DJ Moore and Marvin Harris Jr. and a great offensive line and they pick up a tight end, it would just be like an unstoppable force if Justin Fields was able to go out there and execute properly. But I don't think the Bears have that amount of faith in Justin Fields. I
Yeah.
mean, do you?
I
Do you
don't
have
think
faith?
so either, because I think Matt Eberflus, their head coach, Justin Fields isn't his guy. He was hired after they picked Justin Fields up, and so he's really kind of had to be the coach of, like, okay, well, I inherited this situation, and I'm trying my best to do with what I can with it. And even Ryan Pace too, their general manager. He was hired after the Justin Fields acquisition as well, I'm pretty sure. So both of these guys are relatively newer than Justin Fields was to the organization. And if that's the case too, then that could even be more hindsight to thinking, our time with Justin Fields has come. Now we're here, let's pick our guy. And that could very well be the case as well. I don't think Justin Fields is going to be on the Bears roster next year. I think he's going to be traded, and I do think they're going to pick up a quarterback. Don't know who, but I think whatever happens, though, it would be very interesting to kind of think about, are they going to take Marvin Harrison Jr.? Or do they just feel that Justin Fields doesn't have the weapons around him now to really play at his top performance level? So it's going to be very interesting to see what the Bears franchise does moving forward, especially with this big decision over the first overall.
I do have one thought. You remember what the Texans did last year where they drafted Stroud and then they traded back up to get Will Anderson Jr. because there was like a lot of
Yeah.
debate which one is better. I wonder if the Bears would take Caleb at 1 overall and then trade up from 9 to like say 4 or 5 and pick a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors, because I think the first 3 picks are all probably going to be quarterbacks. So everything
Yeah.
after that, that's where you could get like an elite wide receiver or something. I wouldn't be shocked if that's what the Bears end up doing. If they decide they want to pair Caleb and Marvin Harrison Jr. and just have like the best offense in football this coming year. That would be a really exciting thing for Bears fans. I think that'd be a really smart idea too.
Absolutely. And I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's, the Texans did it this past offseason with the draft. And it worked wonders for them. So, if it's showing to people, hey, it can be done if you excel on your picks. So I could absolutely see that. I just wonder who the Bears would then trade with, because I guess Arizona potentially. Because Arizona, I think, is staked their claim on still keeping with Kyler Murray, being their quarterback. And if they're at 4, they could trade up to 4, but 5, well, and maybe the Chargers, maybe they trade up to get to the Chargers spot, if the Chargers aren't feeling too hot on anybody, and want more draft capital.
Yeah.
Um,
The
I
more
don't know. I could see it going.
I think the Cardinals are probably going to take a wide receiver, probably Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4 overall, because Marquise Brown is leaving in free agency and they don't really have
Yep.
another weapon. But the Chargers, on the other hand, are kind of interesting because they have a lot of needs to fill in that roster, and just
Hmm.
one wide receiver or one offensive tackle isn't going to make the difference. So if they could trade back and maybe, like we said, 4 or 5 spots with the Bears, still land an elite offensive tackle, pick up a bunch of draft capital, I think the Chargers could certainly be interested in doing something like that, unless they really fall in love with a guy like Malik Neighbors or something like that. I think that would probably be the spot you see the Bears trade up with.
Yeah,
Trade up.
and then they could grab a wide receiver. That'd be a very interesting duo, because I mean that was what we were talking about before with the Caleb Williams thing. Like if you take him, you kind of are already playing your whole hand in terms of resources. But imagine taking Caleb Williams first overall, trading up and getting, a rookie wide receiver to go along with him, and then add that to the talent they already have with DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, strong offensive line. They could be scary. They could be scary.
Absolutely.
And
It doesn't
talking
even have
about
to
the
be
NFC,
it could be
oh,
Brock
I'm sorry,
Bowers.
go on.
It doesn't
Oh,
even have
Brock
to
Bowers too.
be. Yeah.
Yeah,
Brock Bowers,
absolutely.
Caleb would be scary.
Yeah, it would be. It would be. And I think that just is going to be ultimately such a great next season to kind of watch the NFC North. Who do you think is going to take it next year?
The NFC North, probably the Lions. I hope it's the Lions, not the Packers.
Yeah. I think it's going to be so interesting because we see the Lions, of course, where they are now in the championship game and how well they've played and turned it around with Dan Campbell. It's taken some time, but sometimes that just shows you what just perseverance, how it can go a long way, and just working with the process. But you have some really, really strong teams in this division. The Bears could easily turn it around with Caleb Williams selection, Marvin Harrison Jr. selection, with the whatever they decide to add to their roster this draft. Then you have, of course, the Lions, which who knows how far they're going to go. They may end up winning the Super Bowl with the roster that they have already. And then who knows who they're going to probably be picking up in the draft in terms of filling some of those holes already there. We just saw a Packers team that defied pretty much a lot of odds, being a young team. How is Jordan Love going to do? He comes out and slings it. Even sometimes even better than Aaron Rodgers could. And so then now you start to see when the Packers got all that flack for Jordan for drafting him a number of years ago, and letting him sit. So you have like 3 kind of, really, really good teams battling it out in the NFC North. And that's not to say the Vikings aren't. There's a lot more question marks with them moving forward in terms of quarterback and what's going on with them. So don't count them out either. But still, it's such just it's going to be a battle, and I'm actually really looking forward to seeing how the Bears turn out from this draft and how they're able to compete with the division. Because I mean, Ryan Pace said, we're going to take the North and we're never going to give it back. So I'm interested to see how the Bears turn that into potentially taking the North and who's going to take it back from them. So we'll see that moving forward.
Absolutely. You need I think that gives even more credence to the argument that they're going to take Caleb Williams because you look at those people in
Hmm.
your division, you look at Jordan Love, you look at Jared Goff and that high flying offense in Detroit. You look even at like the Vikings with Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins and Hawkinson. Like those are some really good offenses. If you're going to compete in that division, you need to also have a really good offense.
Yep.
So I think that lends itself even further to the argument they'll take Caleb at that spot. And if they do, if they take Caleb and they trade up and get a guy like Neighbors or Harrison or Bowers, I could see the Bears being the team that ends up winning that division. But regardless of who wins it, I think you're going to see two wild card teams from the NFC North next season. I don't think any other division has as many good teams as the NFC North does right now in the NFC.
Yeah, especially shaping up to be.
Yeah, I mean the Eagles, they just look like a mess right now. The Giants and the Commanders have to prove that they've improved in order for us to consider them serious playoff teams. The Cowboys, I mean, they'll probably be good in the regular season next year, but who knows once they make it to the playoffs. So the NFC North might be the division in the NFC for the next few years here.
Yeah. And, you brought up the Eagles. So today, news broke that Nick Sirianni is coming back for the Eagles again. So he's going to be their head coach. Obviously, as a Cowboys fan and as unbiased as you are about all things Eagles, do you feel like he should have been given another shot? And if he does, well, he obviously clearly is. He's going to get another year. But do you think he deserves this shot?
Yeah, I do because he took this team to the Super Bowl last year and he almost won it. That's really hard to do for any head coach. I think they really messed up the coordinator process, and I think the locker room, some of the players in there are kind of messing things up. But they brought in Vic Fangio to be their defensive coordinator. That news just broke today, or they're in talks with him, and it seems like a pretty safe bet that that's where he's going to go, Philadelphia. There might be talks between the Eagles and Cliff Kingsbury to come in and be their new offensive coordinator. Once they get some really talented coordinators in there and maybe they reshuffle the lineup a little bit or they help calm down AJ Brown, have him not stir up the locker room as much as it's being reported he was, and Jalen Hurts gets healthy. I think you give him a full deck of cards to play with this coming season and you see what happens. If Nick Sirianni doesn't take a reloaded Eagles team far in the playoffs, so they come out and look like they did last year, that's when I think you move on. But because he took them to the Super Bowl, I don't think you can get rid of him after one bad year.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, I would agree. I think, initially seeing the Eagles collapse, I just kind of felt that, someone's going to have to, take the axe, and as much as sometimes it's not all on the head coaches, a lot of the times them and coordinators are the ones that are the first ones to go, especially after, you start a season 10-1 and it all falls apart and you look like a team that should have never made the playoffs in a wild card round against the Buccaneers. And so, I was definitely surprised at them bringing him back, but it makes complete sense because, of what you just said, Rob, bringing them basically super close to winning a Super Bowl. And so, I think it's the right decision to give him another shot at it. And if some of those similar problems arise, then maybe that coaching change will be made. But they're bringing in, they fired both their offensive and defensive coordinators, so, or I should say, let go part term, part ways with those type of colorful language of saying we let you go, you're done. But and so bringing in some extra talent like that could help balance out the roster. Um, because they certainly have some great players on there. Do you think that Jalen Hurts is the guy moving forward, or do you think the Eagles may potentially select kind of a later round quarterback in this draft to potentially kind of back up Jalen Hurts moving forward?
I think it's kind of dependent on what the Eagles do in the draft because I think that the Eagles, you remember in 2017, Carson Wentz had not looked great, and then they drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round, and then Carson
Hmm.
Wentz was just absolutely terrible after that. I feel like
Yeah,
when they drafted a quarterback in the second round, they absolutely destroyed Wentz's confidence. And that's a huge part of why he faltered. Not just the injury. I mean, obviously that played a role, but having your team go out there and get another quarterback with a high draft pick must have destroyed like what you were thinking on the inside. And I think Jalen Hurts
absolutely.
is a very young quarterback. He's only had 1 year where he's been really good. So I don't think his confidence is anywhere like near where, a guy like Aaron Rodgers would be. If you go out as the Eagles and you get a guy like JJ McCarthy or Bo Nix and you have him sitting on the bench behind Jalen Hurts, I do not think Hurts would be able to handle that pressure. I think he would collapse. If you build around him and you give him a good roster, I think he can be a system manager. I think he can get you to a Super Bowl and he can win you a Super Bowl if you're playing his style of football, which is you have him run the football, you have him take deep shots to AJ Brown and Devonta Smith every once in a while. The question, I guess, is that style of football sustainable? Because this year it didn't really seem like it was. Hurts was hurt all the time and he wasn't able to run as much. Um, if I were the Eagles, I would make the decision, before the draft, are we going to commit to Hurts or not? And if you decide not to, I would trade him for more draft capital before the draft and then try and get like, one of those better quarterbacks like a Jaden Daniels or a Bo Nix. But if you decide he is the guy and that you want to go forward with this guy who needs to run the ball in order to be successful, you really need to not pick a quarterback and just build around Hurts because you will destroy his confidence and have another Carson Wentz on your hands if you do that.
Yeah, and that's never good. Like imagine you being at your job and they bring someone in, it's like, "Oh yeah, he's a new guy and oh yeah, he's just going to sit behind you." So I mean, if you falter, then he'll replace you. I mean, that's certainly has got to shock anyone's confidence in their ability, especially when, coming off of a season where you went 10-1 and then you just dropped off, for on whether it's your kind of skill level that ended up leading to that and others, definitely probably would not be the right move moving forward. Do you think that there is this belief that you look around the league in terms of these Alabama quarterbacks, whether it's Jalen Hurts or Tua Tagovailoa or Mac Jones, and recently with Bryce Young, do you think that with how high Alabama stock is in the college football world under Nick Saban, do you think that these quarterbacks were drafted higher than their actual potential was just based on school and how their upbringing was? And now when they've reached the NFL, it started to, those questions start to arise a little bit more. Do you think it was that Alabama kind of tag that really got these quarterbacks in the viewpoint of, these upper teams and put a lot of faith into them?
Yes and no. Yes, I think that these guys all looked much better, especially guys like Mac Jones and Tua. They looked a lot better at Alabama than they would have if they were at another program. And I think if you picked any random college quarterback and put them on a team as loaded as Alabama has been these past few years, they would look a lot better than they did at whatever other team they were at. But then you also have guys like Jalen Hurts who transferred to Oklahoma and looked better at Oklahoma than he did at Alabama. Again, that's
Hmm.
another program where they have like really good wide receiver talent. CeeDee Lamb was there at that point. Lincoln Riley, they had a lot of good offensive pieces in place. I think it just kind of talks about when you're scouting a prospect, you have to make sure you separate them from their team, especially at quarterback. I think that's just so important because if you're just, standing behind an impenetrable offensive line and throwing the balls to wide open receivers who are just absolutely smoking whoever's covering them, I don't know how well you can evaluate a player like that. I think that's definitely what happened with Mac Jones at Alabama. I think if a team is really looking for a quarterback that they know is going to be good in the NFL, they have to find a quarterback not only who has traits that are transferable to the NFL, like leadership and arm strength, and he can read the field well. You want to find a quarterback who went through a lot of adversity in college. Because, like, I mean, you look at guys like Tom Brady or Dak Prescott. These are guys who went to teams that were absolutely not stacked at the times they were there, and they managed to take them and give them really good winning seasons. If you find a guy who can do that, now that's a guy that I would trust to lead my team to a Super Bowl. And these Alabama quarterbacks just never had the opportunity to do that. So when you draft someone from a really like stacked program like that just goes out and destroys the competition, I think you do run the risk of having someone who looks better in college than they will be in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. And, talking about someone that looked better in college in terms of, what he had done up into this season in the NFL, um, Baker Mayfield absolutely balled out. I think this season for the Buccaneers. I think he showed. I think this is his sixth season in the NFL. That is, he still has that, dog in him in terms of being that guy, that franchise quarterback. And, you saw that when he played at Oklahoma. And, you kind of saw glimpses of it with the Browns. You didn't really see it with the Panthers. You saw a little bit when he was with the Rams. Now he goes out to the Buccaneers, wins that starting job, brings them all the way to a division round game. You know, do you think that he's solidified his place as the starting quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Absolutely. I think for the first time since Baker Mayfield has entered the NFL, you saw the game consistently kind of just slow down for him. He was making the right decision pretty much most of the time with Tampa Bay. Obviously, that all changed in the fourth quarter of the divisional playoff game, but I think 99% of quarterbacks in the league, when they're down and it's the playoffs and it's the fourth quarter, you'll absolutely see them go make a mistake like that. I don't think that's unique to Baker Mayfield. Also, I think the Tampa Bay offense gives him the best wide receivers he's ever had. I know he had Odell and Jarvis Landry in Cleveland, but I think Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are a lot better than that. Especially Mike Evans.
Hands
He's
down.
probably the most like wide receiver friendly, or not wide receiver friendly, quarterback friendly wide receiver because he can go up and get like any ball if you put it near him. So you don't have to be the most accurate guy, which, Baker Mayfield, he isn't that. But he has, I think, great leadership. And, I think he can maintain his cool under pressure most of the time. And I think he's been reading defenses a lot better now than he ever has before. And I think he has a really bright future ahead of him there in Tampa Bay.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting too with the Mayfield situation in Tampa Bay is he only signed 1 year. So he has a lot of leverage in terms of how much is he going to be wanting to be paid, especially if Tampa Bay wants to make him that guy. Can he leverage this kind of season run with the Buccaneers? Can he leverage a better position elsewhere? I think for Baker Mayfield, I think he should take a step back and kind of think about these things before just jumping in and being like, all right, yep, let's sign me up for the next year, type thing. Because, I think this year alone, he has really shown that, given time with it, with a team within a system, you kind of saw that going 4-7, I believe, is how they started the season and then ending it conference, um, conference playoff or divisional playoff game. Um, um, could Baker Mayfield potentially go for more money with another team that really wants to add him? So very interesting thoughts on that. Stays with Tampa Bay, maybe he goes someplace else that needs a quarterback.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Tampa Bay has a lot of important free agents this offseason. So they're going to really have to decide who they use that franchise tag on. Because not only is Baker Mayfield a free agent, Mike Evans is a free agent, Devin White, their all world linebacker, is a free agent, and their all pro safety, Antoine Winfield Jr., is also a free agent. That's four really important guys that if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you can't really afford to lose any of them. And all four of them are going to be free agents this year. So it's going to be fast. Oh, Levante David too. I didn't even realize that he's also a free agent. One of their other really good linebackers. Um,
Wow.
that's a lot of really talented guys to lose in one offseason. So they're going to have to find a way to manage to keep at least most, if not all, of those guys if they want to be competitive next year. I don't know who they'll use their franchise tag on. I don't know if they'll put it on Baker, to prevent him from leaving, or if they'll put it on Antoine Winfield Jr., who will certainly get a much bigger deal from another team if the Buccaneers aren't able to work something out with him and franchise tag him. Um, so getting a deal done with Baker before free agency starts would definitely be huge for Tampa Bay, which means really early on in this offseason, they're going to have to decide, is Baker Mayfield the guy? Because if he's not, then it's not worth it to franchise tag him. You better go keep one of your other
Yeah,
young guys, like Devin White or Antoine Winfield Jr. If he is the guy, then you franchise tag him if you have to, but you really want to try and get a deal done with him before free agency starts so you can use that franchise tag on one of your other young superstars.
absolutely. And something, that kind of reminds me of this similar situation is Geno Smith in Seattle after he came out, won the starting role, and, really played great football and brought the Seahawks to the playoffs, and he asked for, I forget how much money it was, his contract, but it was a pretty big contract, and Seattle paid him that amount. And so, it's going to be interesting to see if the Buccaneers follow suit with that kind of, um, that kind of payout in terms of getting Baker Mayfield signed.
Yeah, that'll absolutely be fascinating to see. And I think they're going to determine the future of their franchise this offseason. So it's going to be a really, really big one for all the fans there in Tampa Bay. Switching to the AFC, there's something I really just want to pick your brain on. I just want to know who you think is going to win the AFC South next year, because that is going to be a really competitive division. And I know you love the Titans, but that
Easy Titans.
really,
No, no, obviously I'm going to say it's the Titans because I believe they can do it and they're going to win the Super Bowl next year. But realistically speaking, when you look at the teams in the AFC South, you're absolutely right. It's going to be a battle. Literally, I mean, 3 out of the 4 teams have basically new quarterbacks. We saw what CJ Stroud was able to do. We saw what Will Levis was able to do. And we briefly saw what Anthony Richardson was able to do before he got injured. And so, and all of them looked good. Like all of them looked, I mean, we were able to see a lot more of CJ Stroud. Will Levis played only about half the season, and then Richardson only played a couple games, but still with what they played, you really were able to see their potential. I think the Colts could have gone so much further if they weren't relying on Gardner Minshew. And Gardner Minshew is a great backup quarterback, but there's a reason he's a backup quarterback. If Anthony Richardson was still with them and didn't have that season ending, I believe, shoulder injury, um, uh, the Colts could have easily won the division, I think, over even CJ Stroud and the Texans. So absolutely. I'm not quite sure what's going on with the Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence has seemed to digress a little bit in terms of his playing ability. But they still have weapons down there in Florida. So, yes, it's very interesting. They sort of fell apart and fell off by the end of the season as well. But you're absolutely right. The AFC South, I feel like for the last couple years has kind of been the laughingstock of the NFL. Kind of like I would even say the NFC South was even this year with the Falcons, Panthers, Buccaneers, um, and uh,
Saints.
Saints. Yeah. So this it's the all of these franchises are turning it around, and I can I was confident in saying, oh yeah, the Titans are going to beat these teams in years previous, but moving forward, of course, a lot of things are up in the air because there are these young players who are developing, and they're developing into great athletes. And regardless of division rivals, regardless of how much I don't like their teams based on division, you know it's they're becoming incredible players, and I just wish all the Titans had them all, because then they would just win all their games. But they can't. That's not realistic. So, but you're absolutely right. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be a fight. That I think that's really what it is. I think in terms of my predictions for it, early predictions, I not to be biased, but I do think the Titans are going to be up there especially with Brian Callahan and the weapons that they're going to be surrounding Will Levis um, with the organization not torn and some of these offseason moves. I think the Titans can be a very dominant team coming out, even just year one in their rebuild now that they're kind of entering in. So I wouldn't be shocked to see the Titans up there. We saw what the Texans were able to do. If they add even a little bit more pieces, you could see that this Texans team absolutely going off as well. So, it's difficult to call. It's difficult to call. But I'm gonna say as an early prediction, I'm gonna go with Texans 1, Titans 2, Colts 3, Jaguars 4. That's how I think the AFC South is gonna play out next year.
Okay. I disagree a little bit with you. So you said
Okay.
Titans won.
Titans 2, Texans
Colts
1,
won.
Titans
Texans
2,
won.
Colts 3.
Okay. Colts 3. I think the Colts are going to win the AFC South next year. Now, that
Interesting.
might be kind of crazy, because if you look at their impending free agents, right, you have Grover Stewart, their starting defensive tackle, Kenny Moore, their best cornerback, Gardner Minshew, backup quarterback. Michael Pittman Jr., their best wide receiver. Isaiah McKenzie,
Yep.
their third best wide receiver. Julian Blackman, a starting safety. Gerald Gennard Avery, a rotational defensive lineman who was pretty impactful this year, I would say. They have a lot of guys similar to the Buccaneers heading free agency this year. And a lot of these guys are also older. Outside of Michael Pittman, all of these guys are like 28, 29, 30. So they're going to have a lot of holes on their team. But I think they foundationally have a really good offensive line. I think they're going to probably franchise tag Pittman and bring him back. And then I think they can add a lot of pieces to their defense through the draft. Um, when you get Anthony Richardson back there, the dude who can, do it all. He can run, he can throw. He's really raw, but he's super talented. He reminds me of almost like if Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, you combined him. Like he's got Lamar's speed and Josh Allen's arm and Josh Allen's ability to just kind of like take off at a moment's notice and make a game-changing run. And it's just he's a really amazing guy, really amazing quarterback. And I think you put all these pieces together, that's going to be a hard combination to beat. I think the Texans are going to be a really close second. I think, especially if they add a few more pieces, they're going to have a legitimate Super Bowl contender next year. They've already got a great defense and like a rising up offensive line and two great wide receivers. If they add another weapon on offense, they'll be even more ridiculous next year. Um, and then the Titans, I think they'll be number three, but I think they're going to be a pretty high up number three. I think they're going to make the playoffs as a wild card team. And I don't think it's going to be a ton of distance between the Colts, the Texans, and the Titans next year, especially if the Titans manage to go out and build up their offensive line and add a wide receiver like we talked about. The Jacksonville Jaguars, on the other hand, I think are going to be pretty clearly number four. Trevor Lawrence seems to me he's declined quite a bit since last year, and I
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's not common for a quarterback to decline like that and then just automatically rebound the next year. The Jaguars have a talented team, but they're playing not very good right now. And it's hard for me to see that changing next year, especially when they lose, whatever free agents they aren't able to re-sign. Um, I just, the way Trevor Lawrence is playing, the way it's been declining, I think the Jaguars will be a distant fourth place team. And then you'll have those other three all really close up at the top there. Colts, Texans, Titans, one, two, three. All in the playoffs would be my guess. Um, but they'll be really close. So I wouldn't be surprised if those three teams were, in the division in any order. I think
Yeah.
all three.
My just Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be definitely close with the three you're saying. With the Jaguars, I think if Trevor Lawrence was not taken first overall, he probably wouldn't even be the starting quarterback of the Jaguars this year. And I think that's just says a lot about, them having hope that he'll turn into this guy, but just the regression that he has had, you mentioned it, it's hard to come back from. And I think, the only thing I'd push back against your Colts analysis with is, we only saw a couple game sample of Anthony Richardson, and we saw a lot of his more positive sides. But even when we watched him when he was playing for Florida, some of those inaccuracies, some of those, not knowing when to run and when to, just throw the ball away. Some of those things we didn't necessarily see at an NFL level yet. Given him, if he played as many games as Will Levis played, and we saw a better sample before, of course, he got injured, I would say, and if he played as well as he did with those first couple games, then absolutely, I think you put the Colts above the Titans. But that's just my reservation. That's why I'm putting them at three, because we only saw a small sample size of Anthony Richardson. And if he is their guy going forward, which he absolutely is going to be, I need to see a little bit more from him before I can say, you know what, yeah, absolutely, they're winning the division.
That's a very fair reservation to have, but it's kind of like when we were talking about Justin Fields earlier. I said if you put him in a certain system, I thought he could be successful. I think with Anthony Richardson, until he grows up a little more, turns into a more developed quarterback, I think you could do something very similar with him in Indianapolis because they have a great offensive line. They have a great running game. They have good wide receivers who can create separation, and they have a great defense. You have everything around him that you need to have around a young quarterback who's developing. If you run the ball both with the running backs and with Richardson and you make easy passes for him to complete, simple first read guys or open maybe 10 yards downfield or whatever. Every once in a while you ask him to throw a deep ball with that giant rocket launcher he has attached to his
Yeah.
body. I think you could see the Colts offense be very simple and yet very effective, at least effective enough to outscore opponents going up against their defense. And I think you could see them be a very successful team next year. But like you said, we don't know exactly what will happen with Anthony Richardson. Maybe he comes back, he doesn't look like himself post injury. That certainly happened to a lot of other quarterbacks who've had that exact injury. Um, it's just really up in the air with how he'll play, but I'm going to bet on AR-15 to come back and come back in a big way this offseason.
Okay. All righty. Well, we covered the AFC South. Now let's go to your kingdom. Let's go to the NFC East. All righty. What do you think? How do you think those teams are going to play out as an early, just, prediction? How do you think those teams are going to stack up? One, two, three, four.
That is really tough because if the Commanders go, and I've seen reports they're trying to trade up to the number one overall pick to get Caleb, but even say they don't get Caleb, say they're at number two and they get Drake May, and they bring in
Mm-hmm.
a guy like Bill Belichick or Mike Vrabel to be their head coach. Um, Add a few other pieces in the draft. I could see the Commanders being the most improved team in the league this year, going from, bottom of the barrel, number two overall pick to being a playoff team this coming season. If they build a quarterback, or not build a quarterback, pick a quarterback, hire a really good head coach and build around him. I mean, I could see the Commanders being the number two team in the division this year. I think the Cowboys will still be number one because they just regular season wise have complete dominance over the division. I think Dak Prescott is, he hasn't lost to the Giants since like 2016. He has never been swept by the Eagles. He's got a winning record against every opponent in the division. I mean, I would assume the Cowboys will win the division again, although, there hasn't been a repeat NFC East winner in 19 years. So,
That's
uh,
true.
that being said, I think if there was a team that was going to take it from the Cowboys, it would not be the Eagles. It would be the Commanders. Now, the Eagles might put it all together again this offseason, new coordinators, new draft picks, all that sort of stuff, and look like they did, a year ago instead of the way they did this past year. And if that happens, then I think that will be the team that gives the Cowboys a run for their money. But I just don't have faith in that happening right now. And I don't think the Giants are going to turn things around that much this offseason. So I'm going to say the Commanders are probably the number two team behind the Cowboys. Then Eagles number three and Giants number four is probably the way I see it shaping up.
What do you think is going to be the case with the Giants quarterback room? Do you think that they're going to be drafting one in this round, or are they sticking it out with Danny Dimes?
I think if one of the two main guys falls to them for some reason, they would take him, but I don't think that's going to happen. It sounds like the Giants have openly committed to Daniel Jones as their quarterback for at least next season. And really, that's all they can do because of the contract they gave him last year.
Yeah.
There's really no option. They could draft a guy in the first round, but Daniel Jones is going to be on that team for at least a few more years, unless they find a really, really willing trade partner willing to eat like a big chunk of the cap hit. Um, so I think they have to commit to Daniel Jones just because of the contract they gave him. Kind of similar to what the Cowboys are probably going to have to do with Dak Prescott this coming off season. Um, if I were the Giants, I would just try to build around Daniel Jones. Maybe if there's a guy you really like there, quarterback at number six, you go and take him and to have him sit behind Daniel Jones for a year or two. Um, Maybe even, just have Daniel Jones be the most expensive backup quarterback in NFL history. But that just seems unrealistic to me. So I really think they're going to stick with Daniel Jones there.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, no, I agree. I think Giants are definitely going to be the number four team. I think they've got a lot of holes to fill moving forward, and I don't know if they have the ability to fill all of them before the next season, just with some of their contracts that they've end up going forth with, as you mentioned, with Daniel Jones. I think you brought up a really great point. I absolutely agree with you. I could see Mike Vrabel going to the Commanders and turning that team around and, really building with a, brand new rookie quarterback potentially. Um, but I don't know necessarily if Vrabel would want to go and step into a situation where he's kind of having to start over again, because that's what he didn't want to do in Tennessee. So, but anyways, regardless of whoever that coach is, I could absolutely see the Commanders kind of starting over with a top kind of prospect quarterback coming in and, with because they have a lot of draft picks moving forward, especially with their trades this past season. I believe Chase Young to the Bears, I believe. Um,
Niners. Montez Sweat went to the Bears.
Niners. That's right. That's right. Yep. Yeah. So, but those things, they got themselves some more draft capital. They could easily rebuild this team. And I always felt this year too with the Commanders too, um, that they were, despite what their record said, they were a much better team than their record. And it seemed like they played a lot better in games when, of course they lost, but they played their opponents a lot closer than some of these other teams that had equal records with them, if not better.
Absolutely. They have a lot of talent on that team right now. They don't have a good coach. They don't have a good quarterback. But if you give them those two things and they have that confidence, I think you'll see a lot of their better players turn in better performances next season than they did this past season, just because they'll feel like there's a reason to go out there and put it all on the field. I think you'll see their defense play better. I think you'll see their offense play better. I think the whole thing will just look like a much smoother operation once you have that quarterback and head coach in place. And like you said, they have a ton of draft capital, so they can fill a lot of those holes on defense and offensive line this draft cycle, and also signing free agents. It's definitely not impossible for them to turn this thing around to be a really good team next year.
Yeah, absolutely. So I absolutely agree. They could easily step into that number two spot. I do think the Cowboys are probably going to take the division. Just what McCarthy has been able to do already. But I think if the Eagles figure out their situation, they can easily be up there as well.
For
So,
sure.
it's definitely going to be interesting to see because they went they went 10-1 and then they dropped off. How are they going to start the season? Are they going to be just as dysfunctional as they were at the end of the season, or are they going to get um, the kinks worked out a little bit? So we'll see how the Eagles turn out going into next season. But yeah, I would probably put my kind of predictions for those. I would probably go Cowboys, Eagles, Commanders, Giants. And the only reason is just because there's still a lot of those question marks with the Commanders. Even if they draft a guy, are they going to, is that guy going to be, their next dude, or could it turn into like a Bryce Young kind of situation where it's just like, he's not really the guy. And not that we don't have talent. It's just, if things aren't working out. So that's probably how I'll put him there. But you have no faith that the Cowboys are going to go on in the playoffs, correct?
I got to see what happens in the offseason first, because I don't have any faith they're going to play well, at least in the beginning of any other playoff games. But if they build a team that's good enough to overcome that, I think you could at least say them make it to an NFC championship game. Uh, Maybe McCarthy will change things. But yeah, no, I don't have a lot of faith in their playoff ability moving forward, sadly.
Well, that's okay. That's okay because the Titans are going to win it anyway. So it would just be so sad if the Cowboys even made it to the Super Bowl. They made it to your championship game, which you've always wanted to see in your lifetime. It would just be tough to just be heartbroken because you made it that far, but you didn't get it, and it's tough being first losers. So it's I'm sorry to say, but that's just what the cards are saying to me. So
Yeah, I know. Will Levis and Traylon Burks just gonna tear it all up next year.
they're going to line it up. Absolutely. People think, oh, Traylon Burks, he sucks. Get him out. No, he's going to be better than even CD Lamb this upcoming season.
That's
He's
quite
going
a
to have a
bold claim.
breakout season. It is.
That's a very bold claim, Carson. You want to put
Absolutely.
some Jack Daniels on
Absolutely.
that?
Okay, maybe I'm not so confident in that one. We'll see how the offseason goes because what would be my luck is he gets traded this offseason and then I automatically lose the bet. So, or he's gonna go to a different team and then like ball out, and then I would probably still lose the bet because he's not even on the Titans. So yeah, so let's just wait till the season starts. We'll see how it goes. But absolutely, that's gonna be my prediction. That we're gonna see Will Levis throw for 5,000 yards. And who's gonna be catching most of them? Traylon Burks. Definitely gonna be a 2,000 yard uh, you know, receiver this year, this upcoming year. So I can
2K
see
trade.
it. Yeah. 2K Trey. That's basic. That should be my new rap name. Absolutely. 2K Trey.
2K Trey. That would be a great rap name for you. I can see it.
You know what? I will say if Traylon Burks goes for 2,000 yards, I will write and release a rap song, my own written one on this channel. So if he goes 2K, then there we go.
2K
2K
Trey.
Trey will be the title of the track. That's what I'll promise.
I have never wanted to see Traylon Burks succeed more than I do right now.
It's gonna happen. I just have to get the writing juices in mind because it's obviously already written in the stars. So I just have to start brainstorming right now.
Well, I imagine Traylon Burks going for 2,000 yards would be very good for your writing juices. So
Absolutely, absolutely, hands down, hands down. Yeah.
2K Trey. Oh man, if that actually happens, we got to get like shirts and stuff that say that, 2K Trey.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. It's gonna be the new drip. That's really what it's gonna be. People are gonna be wearing it all over.
Of course, it'll be a number one seller.
Absolutely, hands down. I see it already. All right. Well, I think the last kind of thing we need to cover is today it broke right as we were recording this, but Jim Harbaugh is going to be the Chargers' next head coach, which is breaking news, of course. Um, I think honestly he's well suited for that role, but the question mark still is where's Belichick going? So where do you think Belichick is going to be going, Rob? Do you think it's going to be the Falcons that he's had two meetings with, or someplace else?
Well, first, I just want to say about Harbaugh. I think that was a great hire by the Chargers. Harbaugh is a proven winner, and that's what the Chargers really need. That's the one thing that feels like they've lacked is that winning identity, which I think Harbaugh will bring to them. As for Bill Belichick, oh man, I mean, if he doesn't go to the Falcons, where else would he go? Like, who still has a head coaching opening? The Commanders, the Falcons. Is that
Panthers,
it?
I think.
Panthers. That's
I
right.
Panthers.
The Seahawks.
The
So the
Seahawks too. That's right.
Seahawks, I think I saw a rumor that it's not set in stone, but it's very likely Dan Quinn will be their next head coach, with his offensive coordinator being Chip Kelly. The head coach, I think, where was he this year? Head coach, doesn't matter. Um, was he at,
Yeah.
I forget where Chip Kelly was coaching, which college program he was at, but he's going to come and
Yeah.
be the offensive coordinator
Okay.
for Dan Quinn in Seattle. As for Carolina, I don't think Bill Belichick wants to go to a team like Carolina that has a ton of holes, he's not positioned to win right now. I think he's only going to coach for maybe 1, 2, 3 more years at most because he wants to go out there and win a Super Bowl and show the world that, hey, I can win a Super Bowl on my own without Tom Brady. So then that leaves what? Atlanta, and who was the other team that didn't have a head coach yet?
Washington.
Washington. Washington, they could be a contender if they go out and get a quarterback and fill some of those holes. You have Bill Belichick coaching that defense. They would have to go find a really good offensive coordinator. Um, I mean, that's a tough choice in my mind for Bill Belichick because I think if you want a team that's going to be able to compete next year, the Commanders might be a better choice. The Falcons do not have a quarterback right now. They have to go find a
Yeah.
quarterback. Both of these teams have to find a quarterback, and the Commanders are at a much better spot to do that than the Falcons are. I mean, I think the Falcons' best bet right now might be to either hope that a guy like, Michael Penix falls to you in the draft, or you go trade for a Justin Fields. I don't know if Bill is considering that. I think it seems like there's a pretty good relationship between him and the Atlanta Falcons right now. It seems like he really does want to go to the Falcons, whereas I haven't heard anything about him and the Commanders. But if I was Bill, I think I would go to the Commanders. But the reality of the situation, just from all the reports and everything, I think he will eventually end up going to the Atlanta Falcons.
Interesting. I'm with what your previous thought was with him going to the Commanders. I think Bill Belichick's going to go to the Commanders. I know that he had those meetings. I know he had that relationship with, the Falcons, with those two kind of interviews. But ever since then, it's kind of gone, that kind of trail's gone a little stale. And then, there was that talk with, oh, well, the Dallas Cowboys and Bill Belichick, how's that going to go? And then that trail kind of went, a little stale. I think that, for Bill Belichick, and you kind of hit it on the nail, he wants to win now. And I think that the Commanders, out of all the opening head coaching jobs right now, have probably the best legitimacy to potentially going to win a Super Bowl anytime soon. And if they can get that choice right, especially with where they're sitting at 2 overall, even if you don't trade up to get Caleb Williams, you can easily get the second best quarterback or even your first choice, depending on who the first overall pick goes to. Um, and so it gives you kind of a whole lot more weapons at hand to rebuild a winning culture in a team. And what a better place to do it than our nation's capital, with everybody kind of watching you. It's kind of the best stage to do it at. And if you're really going out there to try to be like, you know what, I want to show the world that I can coach a winning Super Bowl team without Brady, because Brady left and won a Super Bowl without him. He wants to do the same. And especially doing it on a big stage such as DC's team, I think that would be something that would be very, very big for him. And even so I think Belichick going to the Commanders makes the most sense to me. I know there hasn't really necessarily been any like notion that that's going to be the case, but I do think that would probably the best place for him. In terms of the Falcons, I don't know. I feel like yes, they need a quarterback, but who are they going to get? Is it going to be a Justin Fields? Well, do you have enough faith that Justin Fields can be that guy? And so it's just tough because the Falcons, they also have a really good like roster other than quarterback as well. But I still think Belichick to the Commanders would be a smart move uh, for Belichick. And actually, going against what you said before, I think Vrabel is going to go to the Seahawks. I think Mike Vrabel is going to go to the Seahawks. There's been some rumors I've seen on my end in terms of Titans rumors, in terms of that he's getting his foot in the door with the Seahawks taking over their head coaching role. Um, because Mike Vrabel was one of he doesn't want to kind of start from scratch. He clearly didn't want to do that with the Titans. So on the table right now, the Chargers are now off the table, and so now you have the Panthers, and I don't think he's going to want to walk into that situation. Um, I could also see him going to the Commanders as well, because I still think that's a better overall coaching situation than the Falcons. But if still, I think the Seahawks, out of all of them, in terms of what he wants to do as a coach and coach a Super Bowl winning team as well, I think going to the Seahawks is going to be in his best interest for Vrabel. So I think Vrabel to the Seahawks, Belichick to the Commanders. I don't know who for the Panthers or the Falcons, but I think those spots for Belichick and Vrabel are would be the best choices for them.
Well, now that we're talking about just like the amount of head coaches and the amount of head coach openings, I'm starting to think Bill might not get hired at all. And let me tell you why.
Mm,
Okay. Because there are two coordinators from this offseason who are almost like guaranteed to get hired. And that's Mike McDonald, the Ravens defensive coordinator, is basically guaranteed a head coaching job somewhere, and Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator from the Houston Texans.
yep.
Then Mike Vrabel, in my opinion, is also guaranteed to get a head coaching spot. And then I think this Dan Quinn and Chip Kelly combo in Seattle is really building up a lot of momentum. A lot of insiders have said that it looks like it's going to happen. No guarantee, obviously, but if those four guys are all,
Yeah,
going to get head coaching spots, that does not leave an opening for Bill Belichick.
it's
Um,
true.
he's only interviewed with the Atlanta Falcons so far. He has not interviewed
Hmm.
with any other team yet, and no other team seems to want to interview him. So I don't know if he's just declining their request or if they don't want him, but it's starting to look to me almost like Bill Belichick is not going to get a head coaching position this offseason, as crazy as that might sound, just because of how
Yeah.
many other amazing candidates there are out there. Mike McDonald, Bobby Slowick, Mike Vrabel, which coaches like Rabel and Slowick and McDonald don't become available very often. Um,
Hmm.
it's crazy to me though, because Belichick, I think, is probably the greatest defensive mind in all of football. Still, to this day, I think he would give any team he goes to a top five defense automatically. It's just his colossal failures on the personnel management and the offensive side of the ball. Especially if you have like a young quarterback you're trying to develop, like the Atlanta Falcons or the Commanders will be. Um, Probably the Seahawks too, if they decide to, get someone to put behind Geno Smith. I mean, is that really the guy you want in charge of doing that? I don't think it would be. So I'm going to actually change my prediction from Bill going to the Atlanta Falcons to him just not getting a head coaching job at all this coming season.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Thinking about those top candidates that you're right, they don't come around as often. Wow, could this be the official phasing out of Belichick with all of these other top quarterbacks that we all grew up with? Could this be kind of the beginning of the end for him in terms of not getting a head coach job?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, would he take a job as a DC if he doesn't get a job as a head coach? I think you could certainly find 100 teams, well, not 100, but you could find almost any team willing to give him a job as a DC. Even the
Oh
Cowboys,
yeah,
when leaves to go, coach in Seattle. But would his pride let him accept a job as a defensive coordinator? I don't think so.
that's true. No, I don't think so either. I don't think he would unless he values coaching more than his I guess stature in the league as a head coach, then I could see him potentially being like, you know what? I'm going to step down and be a defensive coordinator because I still love the game, or it will probably get to him. Interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think he would want to take that decrease in
Here's a
job.
theory for you. Okay. So you look at a team like the Cowboys, who might be parting ways with Mike McCarthy next year if they don't win the Super Bowl, which isn't, the most likely thing in the world. So what if he sees that defensive coordinator opening and he's like, you know what? I'll take that.
Mm,
Amazing job on the defensive side of the ball this year. And then when McCarthy gets fired next year, after the Cowboys don't win the Super Bowl, I'm going to be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, America's team. Everyone's going to have their eyes on me, and I'm going to go win a Super Bowl with them, and I'm going to cement my legacy as the greatest coach of all time by winning a Super Bowl with America's team and like ending their drought. I don't know how likely that is just because like we just talked about the whole like situation with his pride and being a defensive coordinator. But if I was going to be a defensive coordinator as Bill Belichick, I think that is the situation I would be going into.
absolutely. No, that just seems like if he's thinking that far down the road in terms of okay, well, none of these head coaching spots are really wanting to offer me this job. Maybe I step down for a little bit and I step down into a place where I'm not fully sure that the head coach can retain his job at the end of this next upcoming season. Um, he could definitely be playing a game of chess while others are playing checkers around him, and I wouldn't put it past him, especially with everything he's been able to do on the field in terms of coaching. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be wild to see where he ends up going. That's definitely the thing I'm going to be keeping the closest eye on. That's not Cowboys related this offseason. Just the best coach of our lifetime, the best coach in NFL history. The fact that he might not be hired to coach somewhere else as a head coach is just going to be the craziest storyline of the offseason, I think.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah, wow. Well, so you said in terms of the championship game picks, you think Chiefs and Lions Super Bowl. I think Ravens and Lions Super Bowl. We have a bet going that if the Ravens beat the Chiefs, I win. I lose, of course, if Patrick Mahomes continues to destroy my picks in terms of me picking the other team that he's up against. Um, going to be fascinating this upcoming weekend. But not only in the NFL world, the UFL world is also kicking up. A lot of teams are adding players in free agency. That whole process is moving forward. Um, so if you are, following us and starting to get into the UFL, the United Football League, I encourage you all to go look at the teams and find a team that you think best, suits you going into this season. And if you want, please comment down below what your team is and who you're going to be following. We love to see that. And it's going to be a fun off season, not only for the NFL, but with the kicking off of the United Football League. It's going to be really cool to see these teams starting to take shape when the kind of the training period starts before the season. So how are you feeling about your Renegades going forward?
Well, I mean, I feel about as good as I can right now. There's a lot of question marks around them. Quarterback controversy. We don't know how good a lot of these players are actually going to be in the spring league. But it's exciting. You know, they're the reigning champions of the XFL. There's no reason to think that they won't go out there and have a great season. It's just definitely the season I've looked the most forward to for any spring football league, which is really saying something because I was super excited about the last couple of seasons we've had here of the USFL and the XFL. And I
Yep.
can wait until March 30th to watch the kickoff of this league, Renegades versus Stallions, two reigning champions against each other. It's just really exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm super stoked for the kickoff on March 30th. I am siding with my old quarterback who I followed when I was a New Jersey Generals fan with you, Rob. And Luis Perez is, I'm hoping he wins that starting job so he can dominate the Stallions in that game, that beginning game. Um, as I would love to see it. But regardless of who wins, who loses, it's going to be such a great matchup between these kind of two heavyweights of both leagues before they ended up merging. Great way to start off the season. And that reminder is March 30th, 2024. Going to be super cool to watch. We'll be starting to cover some more UFL related news in future podcasts when information such as schedule releases happen. I believe there's going to be even a uniforms reveal coming up because the XFL used Under Armour as their kind of contractor for their uniforms. Do you remember who the USFL used off the top of your
I,
head in terms
I don't
of?
remember.
Anyways, regardless, they used a different one, so they're gonna have to redesign some of the uniforms. So that should be cool. We'll bring you that news as soon as that breaks. And the rosters are filling up, so absolutely, this is the time. When you're in the middle of watching some of these playoff games happening for conference championships, hop on the UFL websites and media pages and start to follow some of these players and teams because if you're not ready, it's going to sweep you up in a storm and you want to be ready for it. So it's going to be a lot of fun. All right, Rob. Well, is there anything else that we did not cover in this episode today?
No, I think we had a great episode. We talked about everything from Justin Fields to the, NFC and AFC championship games to the UFL. So we've pretty much talked about everything important going on in the world of football right now. And there's really nothing left to say, I don't think.
Absolutely. Yeah. Had a lot of fun. Well, guys, as a reminder, thank you for joining us on the Redzone Rodeo. Really thankful to all y'all who continue to come out and watch and support. If you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe, share with your friends. Every little bit helps with us. And feel free to comment below if you have an opinion on something that we may have chatted about or even have recommendations on what to cover in our next podcast. So we look forward to chatting with you all and seeing you all next week. So until then, we'll be signing off, but we'll see you all next week. All right, guys. See ya.